Hello everyone and welcome to an Edge of Dawn tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you how we take a shot that's done in the daytime and turn it into this. So this video is going to basically be a more in-depth breakdown of one specific shot in our scene that takes place at night but was shot in the daytime. And you can take this tutorial and you can apply it to any shot, any scene you want in your own projects and put them all together kind of like what we did. This here is the original shot, where we have the good guy, Nick, and the bad guy, Bruno, in a scene where he's trying to escape the chainsaw-wielding bad guy, which of course every single horror film needs, right? One of the things for me that sells a day for night is not just the day for night filter or the post you can do to make a day for night, but it's to add something into the sky, whether it be stars or clouds. That always sells a good day to night for me. What I wanted to create was a really cool scene out in the middle of nowhere at this old abandoned mine that looked really cool. The unfortunate thing was that we didn't have the budget to haul a bunch of lights out to this location. So I had to figure out how to effectively do this scene in a day for night post process. So I'm going to go through this kind of fast, and we're going to start with the fact that this footage needs to be tracked. When we track footage for sky replacement, we usually like to have something in the background, in the far background, like mountains or something like that. And this is a little more difficult because it doesn't have a distant background. So we're going to be creating a problem with parallax, where the background image isn't going to look like it's moving appropriately with the structure in the foreground and in the background. So usually I would use either After Effects Tracker, and I'd track 2 points in the background, somewhere in here, but since they're so close to the foreground, it's not going to work. Or I could use a program called Mocha, which is a part of After Effects, but that also didn't work because this planar tracking here wasn't going to be correct for sky replacement, which is way in the background. So I had to go out and get a program called Synthesize, which is a wonderful tracker, and it tracks all of the data and your camera movement in the program. Then you can import that into After Effects and have some cool track points. Now I'm going to show you right here what it did. So all these track points here, once I imported the data from Synthesize, these track points are imported into a 3D space. This is a camera in 3D space, and it replicates your camera movements that you did in real life. So here, as you can see, all these little track points followed very nicely with the foreground and the background. And you got little dots back here in Z space, and you got points up here closer. So it creates a really nice camera movement for your project. Okay, so once I have these track points here, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to key out this sky. And I'm going to do that before I color correct it to look like nighttime. The reason I'm going to do that is so that I can get the clouds and the scene together first and then adjust it to look like it's at night. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my footage twice, and I'm going to pre-compose this footage. Okay. And now I'm going to say something like Matt. Now I'm using a technique which I learned from videocopilot.net. Those guys over there have some wonderful tutorials that will teach you a lot about After Effects. So if you're interested in anything After Effects, graphics, compositing, rotoscoping, all kinds of stuff, those guys know it. And now I have this composition with the 2 layers of the original footage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a colorama to this first layer. And I'm thinking that looks really good right there. And I'm just kidding. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the output cycle. I'm going to put a ramp gray in there. So this is creating a gradient. And now what I'm going to do is make it so that the sky is all white, because that's the part that's going to be keyed when I use it as a matte. So I'm going to put in a white point. And that does a pretty good job of making a lot of it white. I'm going to put in a black point here. And first let me say, right now what I'm focusing on are the trees. Because in all honesty, it's going to be really tough to pull the sky out without pulling out the structure. And in a second, we're going to go over how I had to rotoscope all of this out. So first, I just want to focus on these trees because I obviously can't rotoscope the leaves and the twigs and everything. So I'm just focusing on this section right here because this is going to be the tough part. I'm going to be manipulating this until it looks pretty good. I'm going to take this second layer and I'm going to go track matte, Luma inverted matte, and that's going to key out the white. And now I can adjust so that I get rid of most of that blue right there. But at the same time, since we're going to have kind of a dark blue background, which is the sky, it's going to fit pretty well. So you can adjust it however you like when you're working on your project. I did it so that the leaves were a bit opaque. As you can see, it's kind of see-through the trees, but it's going to work out when I put the background in there. So now I've keyed out this sky in this section here. It's looking pretty good. So I'm going to go back to my original composition. I'm going to delete this because that was just an example. Mine is right here. So now if I turn this on, it's going to look this. Actually, you know what we're going to do? We're going to hide these track points too so that they don't distract us. Let's do that. All right, wonderful. So now I have my keyed version here, which is this layer, and I have my original layer here, which is why we can see the blue background. So now I can put anything I want in between this keyed version and this original version, such as clouds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a picture of clouds and I'm going to place it between the keyed version and the original version. So I press view. That is pretty intense, and that is definitely not what we want. As you can see here, this does not look good at all, and that's kind of where we're focusing on. So what I'm going to do next is first I'm going to lower the opacity to where it looks kind of realistic. And actually, we're going to do another step here pretty soon where we color correct it to day for night. And we're gonna bring this down to an even lower opacity, so somewhere around 17. So as you can see, there's still a little bit of cloud right there. Right now it's blending in with this original layer. So now I'm going to color correct my first layer to look like day for night. So what I did is I used color finesse. I brought down the overall exposure so it was pretty dark. I pulled out the reds a bit. I brought up the blues, and the last thing is I went in to the full interface and I brought the saturation back a little bit, and this is what it looked like. That's not what it looked like. Let me correct this. Okay, let me get these two out. There we go. So this is my bottom layer, and this is pretty dark. You can adjust to what you like. And now when I add those clouds in, that's on top of the first layer. And now when I add my keyed version in, you can see that it's behind these trees here. And then what I did was I copied and pasted this color correction to the keyed version right there. I'll turn it on. Now it's the exact same color correction. So now if we zoom in to this section, it's looking pretty good. And as you saw before, when it wasn't color corrected, you can see there was some blue fringing and it looks see-through, but now it's not bad. Now, when I add a photo in, first it comes in as a 2D image, and when I put this 2D image in there, it's not being tracked and it's not following the camera movements. So when I put this image in, I select 3D, and it makes it a 3D object. And now in this composition, because my camera down here is working with the tracked points, it's creating a 3D camera movement matching the one I did in real life, which you can see here. If we kind of zoom in here, this is the image, right? And this is the camera. So now, as you can see, that sky stays still, but the camera moves. So when I go back, here's the image of the sky. And when I move with it, you can see the camera moves around that image just like it was in real life, moving around the structure. So that's where SynthEyes comes in really handy and can create some awesome 3D camera movements that match what you did in real life, so that you can get some good clean tracks. When I keyed out the sky here, it keyed out most of the structure and his shirt and things like that. So what I had to do next is duplicate the initial footage and rotoscope this section out, which is this mask. And when I turn it on, that's it without the color correction. As you can see, I masked as close as I could to the edge. I added a small feather, and because this is all day for night, this actually works pretty well. Right now, this doesn't look good, but here is my mask. And then when I copy the original color correction again and apply it to this layer right here, now that's starting to look pretty good and it's starting to match the background. Now this part here, I used just a regular color key because I didn't want to mask his head, so I used After Effects' color key. And it did a pretty good job of keying out the blue from the sky and not the rest of him. So now I have this rotoscoped layer, the keyed layer, the clouds layer, and the original layer. Now the last thing I had to worry about was this pipe, and I just couldn't key out the sky without taking out part of this pipe. And so again, I had to mask this pipe. So I duplicated my original layer again, and this one already has the color correction. And now, as you can see, I masked it so that it followed. And this is it without color correction. So as you can see, it follows. And then what I did is I applied that same color correction to this layer, added a feather to the mask, and it came out pretty good. So basically all I'm doing is working with layers, and I'm using my original layer here. I'm putting a cloud layer in front of it. I'm keying out the trees. Then I'm rotoscoping this section out since I couldn't take a clean key. Then there's the layer of the pipe, and it all flows together. So there you have it. There's an example of how we did a day for night shot. And if your production doesn't have the budget to haul lights out to your location and shoot at night, then here's a pretty good way of stepping around that obstacle and getting your scene done. All right, I hope you enjoyed, and thank you for watching.